Hey everybody, Mike Burkholder, Contra Costa today. I'm super stoked. I got Contra Costa County Board of Supervisor Karen Mitchoff. She represents District 4. She was first elected in 2010, and before that, in 2008, was Pleasant Hill City Council. And I believe you've been in politics since about 2003?
In elected office, I've actually been in politics since 1981 because I work for former elected officials.
So you're a lifetimer.
Guess no. I have 11 years private sector experience.
Nice. So let's get into this because I'm going to do something a little different. I never really get into sports. But you had a post the other day that was anti-Patriots. What is that about?
Well, first of all, they keep winning, and I get tired of that. Now, I love the 49ers, and I know they've won, but I don't like Tom Brady, and I just get tired of him.
You don't like a winner?
Nope, has nothing to do with that. I don't like how he treated his former girlfriend and the mother of his first child.
Fair enough. And then what about these talks about the Raiders get to play in San Francisco?
I'm tired of the Raiders. I really am. I was a loyal Raider fan. I actually worked with a lady who was at a time a former Raiderette and would go to a lot of games. I'm a John Madden, Kenny Stabler Raider fan. After that, forget it.
And so now you're all 49ers.
Yes.
Nice. So I want to make people aware of this because I didn't really pick up on it until the Board of Supervisors meeting a few weeks back where you are a book nerd. And,
okay.
And you said something where you read about 67 or 70 books last year as chair of the Board of Supervisors. How in the world do you get through 67, 70 books in a year?
Well, that was an anomaly. Usually it's only about 50.
Only?
Only. But some of those, a very small percentage, probably maybe 10, if not, are audiobooks. And so there's an ongoing discussion with many of my friends whether audiobooks actually count. And half of them think they do and half of them think they don't. But as to actually physically reading the others, I love to read. I like going to movies. I have friends. I do a lot of stuff. But being chair is managing the board meeting itself. It isn't that you have extra duties or responsibilities per se. I've still got everything else I need to do, but it's how I spend my time.
So what else do people need to know about you?
That's an interesting question. I thought about that on the way out here. How much should I share? Well, I'm a single person, so I don't have any kids. I'm not currently in a relationship.
Are you looking?
I don't know. The
You don't
last
know
one
yet.
didn't end too well, so...
His fault, right?
Yes.
Okay, of course.
No, not of course. But it's been a very traumatic year. A lot of people know. I don't know
Yes.
if you know that. And so I take care of an aged mother. I don't have her. I don't have to take care of her all the time, but there's a lot going on with taking care of an aged parent. So I just need to take time for myself.
Absolutely, and that was kind of I kind of threw a curveball to you at that, so I apologize.
No, that's okay.
So, but let's get in right into this. So, I thought it was very interesting at the Board of Supervisors meeting where it was kind of your going out of chair speech, and you got emotional because we don't really ever see you get emotional. What was it about last year and I thought the county supervisors had a lot of success working with a lot of the departments, implementing a lot of things. I know you had a lot going on personally. What was it about that moment where we finally got to see you have emotions?
Well, you always need to guard against emotions because you're in a decision-making role, and depending on the issue, we can get pretty emotional on specific issues. But until I became a member of the Board of Supervisors, I always had a day job, and you have colleagues, and you socialize with them and what have you. So the 4 other members of the Board of Supervisors are my colleagues, even though we may not see each other every day. And because of what happened last year, and for those who don't know, I'll just put it out there, my brother was murdered, and it was a very tragic situation, and the year before that, my father had died. And so it's just been a lot to deal with, and with family issues. And so my colleagues were very supportive, and I didn't realize I would get emotional, but I felt I needed to thank them for their support. Behind the scenes we're friends. We don't socialize a lot, but
it's cordial.
Cordial, and you just develop an affinity. You do, because nobody else really is in that position. We have our staff who we can download to, but we work very closely together. I love our board because we get along. We don't always agree on issues, and that's a good thing, but I know of boards that are constantly 3-2 votes, and they don't like each other. They don't talk to each other. They don't socialize, what have you. We don't have that problem here.
See, and I like 3-2 votes because it means you're going to get the best policy in most cases forward.
Well, not if they're always 3-2 and the same 3 and the same 2.
Sure, because you're just ramming stuff in at that point.
But the other side to that is
there has to be give and take, right?
There has to be give and take, and that's why a lot of times you get to 5-0 votes. We had 3-2 votes on the selection of the interim DA a year and a half ago. We had 3-2 votes on the closing of the ICE contract. And I think we even had 3-2 vote on whether to move forward. No, that was a 4-1 vote to move forward on the construction of the jail addition out in West County. So those go along lines of strongly held beliefs on how our criminal justice system should move forward here in Contra Costa County.
And piggybacking off that, as far as the county sheriff and all of that, it's becoming harder to police the community because of state laws and even national laws. How are you guys working with the sheriff and his team to give them the tools to be able to keep our community safe? Because that's kind of a hot topic right now.
Well, for those who may not know, the sheriff, of course, is an elected official in and of his own right. So the only...
But you guys provide the budget.
Yeah, all we do is budget, and that does go through a county administrative process, and there's... In the sense, that's the limit of what we can do. But my philosophy, and again, for those who don't know, when I said that I was in politics going back to 1981, I worked for former Sheriff Richard Rainey as his executive secretary. So I worked in the sheriff's office for 5 years and got to see a lot of things. So a lot of people think that because of that, I'm very pro-law enforcement. It isn't that I'm pro-law enforcement, I'm pro-public safety. I have an uncle who was a police officer. I understand that, but I like to think of myself as open and what have you. So I have developed good relationships. Of course, I knew Dick. I was not in public service then. And Warren Roop, I had worked for him when he was the assistant sheriff, but I wasn't a county supervisor. He retired the year I was elected. And I knew Dave Livingston because he was a former chief of police in Pleasant Hill, and then when I was a supervisor in Concord, and then became sheriff. So I've known all of our sheriffs, and I feel I have a good working relationship with them. We respect each other. So going to your question, they'll come to me, but they'll go to each of the other supervisors. And,
Sure.
With the jail, I understood why we needed that new jail. It wasn't to house more people. I've actually been in the jail to tour it, not to stay. And I think, I'm not sure if my other colleagues, some of them may have or not, but I go way back because when I began working for former Sheriff Rainey in 81, that new jail had just opened, I think, the previous year. So it was a model throughout the United States, and I knew how it was supposed to operate, and because we've had to double up and bunk and different things. So we want to give our public safety officers, and I think every community feels this way, cameras. In fact, I saw Chief Swanger from Concord last week. They just got new cameras, and he was showing that to me. You want to give them the best equipment for communication, and that's all gone computer-aided these days.
You guys worked with the Highway 4 with CHP and those cameras as well, right?
That's more Supervisor Glover's.
Well, I mean the board as a whole.
Yes and no. That was a state grant, and so we had to support that because
Sure.
there's usually a match. It's not easy to get those. In fact, along 680, probably over a year now, I remember being interviewed. There was one incident of some freeway shootings, but it was the same situation, and that I was asked that. We looked into it, but I believe it was CHP told me our numbers didn't rise to we didn't have the criteria to meet for that. So my understanding is the only place that there's cameras is along Highway 4 and I guess over on 80 in West County.
Sure. So going along the whole public safety standpoint, there's a lot of concern and questioning on what could be done about blight and homelessness. I know that's a very complex issue, and we're not going to get through it, in this interview because, you could go all day on it. But what are kind of some of your thoughts on addressing blight, homelessness? I know you guys are waiting for the recent homeless count that just was done last week or 2 weeks ago. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, they run the gamut, as does everybody. Nobody likes to see a homeless person on the street. I think it tugs at our heartstrings. And then the second thought is, I think there's a visceral reaction. I don't like seeing it because, when I say I mean we as a society. They're dirty, they're probably mentally ill, they could be in a substance abuse situation, and they can be very verbal. And so nobody likes that. But part of it is we don't want to think that's happening. It goes to the whole bigger issue of income inequality, although I was recently informed that maybe we should refer to that as wealth inequality. But whatever you want to call it, it's unfortunate. We have services in the county. There's never enough services, but what I said during my campaign last year, and I was criticized for it, but I truly believe if someone wants to be in a shelter and receive services, we have that there. One impediment are people with their pets, and I am a big pet lover, and I understand that need to connect, and we're looking at ways to address that. But a lot of people choose not to go into a shelter for whatever reason, and I have to respect that. I know in Concord, where we have a shelter, the citizens in the business park around there are upset because homeless people sometimes, not all of them, display and behavior that we don't like. And they think that government should come in and clean that up right away, which I don't disagree with, but we don't have the resources to do that. We're trying to address that, hopefully out by Los Medanos College. In East County, Supervisor Burgess is working hard to get another shelter opened. We have what we call core teams. In fact, driving over here, I saw a county car that said core on it. I don't remember what those initials stand for, but they are the outreach to homeless communities to see how we can get services for people.
And that's been a great program because, people don't expect that the core teams, they expect that it's individuals from the county, but they're actually, part of the core team is police departments in certain cities where they have designated officers that participate with the core team.
Right, and some of our cities pay money to the county to have a specific number of hours to do that outreach in their community.
Yeah.
I don't, the whole conversation about affordable housing and how we're going to house our community, that's separate and apart from the homeless situation. We need more funds in the end for mental health resources.
And I think, people do need to understand it's not like you guys aren't doing anything. A lot of this is people choose not to accept the services for whatever reason it may be. And what I think's interesting, especially out in East County, is people are very quick to blame the city or the county, but that's not necessarily true because people, like you said, whether it's a dog or they just don't want rules, they want to be able to do their drugs, there's a variety of reasons of why that people don't accept shelter. And, you see San Francisco, now you can have these designated locations where people can just go shoot up whenever they want. Is that being looked at here?
I think we have looked at it. We have a needle exchange program. Nothing like what they're doing in San Francisco. As is with everything, there's two sides to a story. The concept of injection sites is that it's safer, it reduces crime, needles are clean. I guess it's an opportunity for people to get medical services if they choose to, as opposed to, as when I was on the Pleasant Hill Planning Commission, there was an adult bookstore next to a grade school, and people, well, it's just, there was a street that separated them,
Sure.
but people would go out into the playground at night and shoot up and or leave used condoms. And so the community was very upset about that. But there's an example of when you don't regulate this, then there's these unintended consequences. And whether it's a school playground or your neighborhood sidewalk, you don't want to see any of that. So, difficult issue, no resolution to it.
Yeah, and then moving on in kind of the same aspect, fire service in all of Contra Costa, I think we're still down, for Confire, I think we're still down 3 or 4 stations.
No, we brought those back up. The only station...
They're not open yet, though, right?
No, we've reopened. The only station that's not opened is Lafayette 16, where we're building or rebuilding. But in my district, well, I take that back. Station 4 did not reopen, and it didn't reopen after we had funds come back based on criteria, and it wasn't cost efficient to do so. So we put more resources in Station 1, which is downtown Walnut Creek. There are two
engines, yeah.
Two teams
Two
there,
teams.
and that's the busiest station in the Confire area. Station 6 down at Todos Santos and Concord is the next busiest. So we put resources and different apparatus there, type of thing. But 16 will be coming back online, and then I know we're working, I think it's with Rodeo Hercules, to rebuild a station there because it was old and we needed better quarters for the firefighters.
Yeah, and along with that, I mean, the whole alliance with AMR, that seems to be working out really well.
It is. It's a very interesting thing. Obviously, some ambulance companies are not happy with it, although we partner with AMR. And so there's a lawsuit in the state about it. And so a number of other fire districts outside our county who want to emulate that model have been a little gotten cold feet. And I sort of get it and I sort of don't. We're waiting for a report back. It works well. It has saved taxpayers money. We've been able to, that whole why does an ambulance and a fire truck show up? Well, sometimes, I always find that interesting. I'll be criticized for this, but when it affects you, a constituent seems to think sometimes they know better than the professional. And there's a reason when both resources show up because of the nature of the call. But because of the alliance, we are now doing the dispatch for both simultaneously as opposed to passing it off. And sometimes we don't have to roll the fire truck. Or if we roll the fire truck, we don't have to roll the ambulance because it costs a lot of money to roll an ambulance. And if they don't transport, they don't get their fee. We have a first responder fee, but you don't always need an ambulance or you don't always need the fire. And it also goes to where that apparatus is currently stationed. People don't know that, there could be a fire truck 2 blocks down on their way back from another call, and they're the closest. And I would dare anyone who needs those services to say, I'm glad that there was somebody there as soon as they could get there.
Sure.
You don't hear that. As I say to the public, you don't want an ambulance, you don't want a fire truck, but you want to pay for the capacity to have one.
Yeah, and we have a slogan out in East Contra Costa Fire where you don't really know where your best service is because the best service is wherever the 3 engines are at any particular time because we don't have the services that Confire has. And, poor Antioch, they get, and I know that's not your district, and I'm going kind of off topic
No,
here,
but I'm on Confire board, and
but-
so that's a big issue to me.
But poor Antioch, you got East Contra Costa pulling state...
Please don't say poor Antioch. I don't have any sympathy.
From a fire standpoint.
No, I'm talking from a fire standpoint.
You got engines going to Brentwood, Oakley, sometime even last night, Bethel Island, two Antioch engines, and this was
They're
sad,
not Antioch engines.
Two
They're engines stationed in Antioch.
Sure, but Okay.
I understand, and I
Okay.
don't mean to be
Two
that-
Contra Costa fire engines from stations in Antioch beat East Contra Costa fire engines to Bethel Island last night on a fatal fire. Engine 53 out of Oakley was first, then you had the two from Antioch.
That's part of fire service.
It
It's
is.
auto aid and mutual aid.
And then you have them also pulling into Pittsburgh and Bay Point. It's a really weird dynamic in Antioch and even Pittsburgh, because some of their engines go to Concord, and
That's how it
it's
works.
just geography problem out here. And
Well, look at the fire in San Francisco.
Yeah.
They pull it's and you know this, Mike, because you respond to these. It's how many engines do we need at any one time, and you're glad that mutual aid and or auto aid is there. Auto aid is automatic.
Sure.
Mutual, each chief has the option to deny that if they're not able to provide services in their area. So you're right. Antioch trucks do respond to East County Fire, and they do respond to Pittsburgh, but so do Concord trucks respond out to Pittsburgh and
Yes.
out to Antioch. It's how the system is designed. It isn't just, it goes back to my concept. You're not paying for a fire truck to be there. You're paying, well, yes, you're paying for the capacity to have
Yes.
fire service. I heard that when I was first on the board, and we did have to close stations. Well, we're paying for this one out in Clayton. Yes and no. Lafayette said the same thing, and we were very fortunate. Didn't have any tragedies happen during that time, but it shows that how the fire system works, and we were able to respond. Fire response times increased, but we didn't lose any life, and I don't think there was any more property damage than wouldn't have been because of the station closure.
Yeah, and it's such a dynamic topic, especially when you throw in the strike teams that are going throughout the state of California.
Well, that always worries me, and I'm glad they go, but then I'm like, but again, the chief has the option to say no.
Sure.
But we know that, that fire last summer right there off of Ignacio and Lime Ridge, I have friends who live there. The fire came right up, and strike teams came from other areas, so you want to be able to do that.
So moving on to something, I don't know if it's more depressing or just
Challenging.
Challenging.
Yes.
Do you have an update on the Delta? Because I know you and some of your
Yes,
other
we
folks.
actually have great news.
Okay.
For those who don't know, there's 5 Delta counties, and in our county, former Supervisor Mary Nedgedly Pifo and I, and now Supervisor Burgess and I represent Contra Costa, and then there's 1 or 2 for each of the others. So there's about 10 supervisors. We've been working on this issue. We've been fighting pushing back on how former Governor Brown wanted to do things. I was very involved. It did get frustrating. It's like, will we ever solve this? Because I remember working for former Supervisor McPeak after the referendum. But Governor Brown would never meet with us as a coalition. His thought was, you're all about no. And we said, no, we're not all about no. There's other options, but he would never meet with us. We have already met with Governor Newsom. We got a letter off to him right after his election, so we met with him, I think it was about 2 weeks ago today. And I think during his campaign, he was like, well, no, we won't do 2 tunnels, but maybe 1. Well, I get that he's been given more information. That's still on the table, but there's other options. And
So he's open.
Yes, and the money's not there. Even though it's out there that it's going to cost 16 or 17 billion, we know it's going to cost 60 or 70 billion. And as you saw last year, a lot of the water districts who were supposed to pay for it aren't willing to pay for it because they're now seeing the folly of that financial picture. So we have to do something. We've always been about a comprehensive water policy for the entire state of California, but you can't do it at the detriment of the Delta, and that's a co-equal goal, and that's what's happening at the Delta Stewardship Council right now and on the State Water Resources Control Board. some type of conveyance, but we call it through Delta, which just means you need to clean up and strengthen the levees so that the water can flow the way it was supposed to. Yes, the biological decisions, they fight that, but I'm a believer in science, and I also believe the critters in the water are part of the food chain, and they're there for the health of the Delta. So the tiny Delta smelt has been, in my mind, like the canary in the coal mine. The tinier they are doesn't mean they're no less important. Not because of their life, but because of what they do in the Delta.
So you're saying there's hope?
There's a lot of hope.
Good. What about cannabis? That's been kind of an interesting topic countywide. Of some cities want it, some don't. We have illegal, I don't know if it's legal is the right word, but we have certain churches popping up here and there that get removed. But where do you stand on the whole cannabis issue, and where do you see it going in the future of the county?
Well, there is a big difference. Cities are more or less urbanized, suburbanized, so they don't have a lot of area for grow, whereas the county does. So I appreciate that cities have turned down that part of the possibility. I believe in personal use if you want it. If you're going to have an outdoor grow in your yard, you need to plant I learned this, you need to plant the right kind of marijuana so it doesn't create odor problems. I believe in delivery. We have a lot of citizens. I had one constituent come and see me. She suffers from multiple sclerosis, and she was going into Alameda County. And it was difficult. She couldn't drive, so she had to take public transit. So I believe very much in delivery. I don't have a problem with a store, a retail front that does that. On Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, we're going to be approving the final format for the requests for proposals that go out. We've been criticized for taking too much time. We understand that, but we want to get it right. I'm not looking at it as a great big moneymaker. A lot of people think, oh, you want to do this so you can bring a lot of money into the coffers of the county. We're not going to get that. In fact, there was an article in the paper the other day that I know the Board of Equalization, I think, is looking at even reducing the state tax on it. But those taxes are there for public safety and public health. There are impacts of having that type of product in your community. And we talked about homeless earlier. There's no revenue source on homeless to address that problem.
Sure.
But there's a revenue source around cannabis so that we can monitor it, make sure that there's adequate law enforcement, make sure that those who have substance abuse problems, we can use some of that money for addressing those problems, because there's never enough. So by and large, to answer your question, long way around it, I support the product if it's managed well. I personally don't use marijuana, but anybody who wants to, go for it.
Sure, as long as they're not driving or impacting
not
the lives
impaired.
of other people. Going on to something a little more positive, you'd mentioned the Board of Supervisors are all friends kind of behind the scenes, but what has David Twa meant to the county?
Well, I've worked under, I figured, 5 county administrators. They all brought their own unique sets of talents and skills. I am very impressed with David. David is not a county administrator that counts to 3. There are those executives, not just county administrators, but in agencies who drive policy and get the votes. David is let the board, gives us options, but the board sets policy and he sets it out. He is an attorney, he is a CPA, and he actually held elective office. So he has a lot of different perspectives. He's very calm, he's very measured, he spends a lot of time and thought in how to solve problems. During these last contract negotiations, there was X amount of money, but the unions, rightly so, had some concerns about our rising health care costs. And originally, when we started the process, David and staff would come and say, this is only what we can do. But by the end of it, he knew that we needed to resolve that. And So he figured out how to do that, and I admire the man greatly. As you may have heard, he was named County Administrator of the Year this last year by his peers throughout the state of California. He is on a number, and has been, currently serves on some committees throughout our County Supervisors Association, throughout the county administrators, and on governor's task forces to try and deal with financial issues and how we get from here to here without bankrupting anybody. So
Sure.
I think very highly of David.
In working with David, you have other department heads that seem to be, moving forward. How important has teamwork meant to the board to be able to develop that trust? Because it seems like you guys more than ever trust the people that are kind of controlling these departments, whereas in the past maybe that hasn't been the case.
Well, I'm in a unique position, having been staff for half of my political career, if you will, or my county career. I have very high expectations of staff because I know how staff operates. And when I say that, I don't mean individual people, but I'm process-oriented. And when constituents ask for something and we say we're going to do it, I have a high expectation that they follow through on it. So when county staff comes and makes a presentation, I am very confident in their recommendations, unless I'm not. And then, because of my background, knowing how things should work, if something's been delayed, as an example, the waste hauler ordinance, I think I came into office and that was an issue, and we still hadn't resolved it as of about 2 years ago.
It's still an issue, though, technically.
It's still an issue, but I knew that it should have been done. There's no reason it should have been delayed, and I have some very strong opinions as to why it was delayed. We finally got to it. Board gave direction what we wanted. It came back different. I do not tolerate that kind of crap. When the board sets policy, staff, you follow up. If you don't like it, I get it, and you can come and tell me why you don't like it and why you don't think it might work, so as to, I might change my mind, and I have done that. But when you get to the issue of trust, well, Federal and John have been on the board the longest. I have the longest tenure, both elected and staff. Candace came from the Danville City Council and actually the Morgan Hill City Council. And Diane had been on both Oakley and East Bay Regional Park. So all of us have worked with staff, and we're very determined individuals. We know what we want. And if we can't get there, then you need to tell us why we can't get there. And as I said, we'll change our mind. Another issue in my district right now is these food trucks that show up on food truck night or whatever it is.
It's the new hip thing.
Yeah. Well, our county health department has some concerns about that, and I get that. But we have an ordinance that says you can't have it in a certain place. And this popped up like 6 months ago. And so the direction was, we need to change that ordinance. Is there any reason why we can't change the ordinance to accommodate these food trucks? No, there's no reason why we can't. Okay, then start working on getting the ordinance amended. I was just informed the other day, it still hasn't been done because it was a case of this department thought this department was supposed to be doing it. That's bullshit. I don't tolerate it well, and I've had very strong words with those in charge that you get this done. And now, because it's been delayed and I thought it was handled, it's a priority. You may have a whole bunch of other stuff to do, but this is a priority.
And along those lines, back to the hauler ordinance.
Uh-huh.
I mean, how do you get somebody to sign up? Because it was a year later and we found out nobody had signed up.
Well, that was a good thing, because then we're not having people, if they're still hauling, we have an ordinance in place and we can give them a citation. We weren't able to do that before. And I know the argument was, well, this was staff driven. They thought $50,000 for a bond was too high. We gave direction that that's what we wanted. And a year later they came back and said, oh, nobody's coming and getting it, so it's obviously too high. We need to lower it to $20,000. I was against that. But nobody's come in to ask for the $20,000 bond either. And the purpose of a high bond was to weed out, if you will, the riffraff. We don't want Joe Schmo getting his truck and going to a citizen who thinks they're a legitimate business and taking their stuff and then hauling it out and dumping it somewhere and getting that money. So
but I also think part of that is the cities really need to mimic the same ordinance.
Yes, they do, and we've asked that they do that. You know, and it's always a matter of limiting resources, and sometimes in this situation, again, the county having more unincorporated area than the cities do, the cities they know where their property is, where somebody might illegally dump, but I would venture to say that the majority of illegal dumping is in unincorporated county. So therefore, the cities say, it's your problem.
Yeah, and you guys have a $1 million bill to pay for it.
We have a lot of money. If we had all the money that people think we have, oh my goodness, what could we do?
Sure. And you know what I appreciate from you is that, you know, when you're at the dais and you have people come up or staff come up, you're kind of the one supervisor that will just stop the nonsense and get, you know, it's almost like, okay, just get to the point already. And I appreciate that because it'll save a 30-minute discussion about nothing, just people liking to hear themselves talk.
Well, it's a blessing and a curse. I appreciate you saying that. I have been complimented that I say it like it is and what have you. But there is something to be said about free speech and people saying what they want. But yes, I have always been that way. Get to the point. If I have questions once you've gotten to the point, I will back up and say, how did you arrive there? Sometimes a story needs to be told, but I learned this working as staff to two former supervisors. Sometimes people they need to tell the story to let it off, and I get that. But when you're in a board meeting and everybody else wants to tell a story, I was chairing, I'm the vice chair of the Regional Planning Commission for ABAG, and our chair was ill yesterday, so I chaired it. And we were getting close to the end of the time, and I've got 25 people on this committee, and they all wanted to speak. And I said, okay, folks, we're going to treat this like public comment. Everybody gets 2 minutes, and I'm timing you. And they really did very well. I didn't have to cut anybody off, but the staff person told me afterward, Karen, when you said that, everything changed in the room, and they were much more concise. So some people may not like that about me, and that's fine, but that's just who I am.
I love it. I like watching it.
You.
I like seeing people kind of react to it just because I'm weird like that.
Well, see, and I'm not even aware of it, so it's sort of interesting to hear.
So, you know, I know we're running out of time here, but what's a typical work week for you? I mean, how many meetings are you in? How many hours is it? And I'm still kind of curious how you find time to read books, but, I mean, what's a typical week?
Well, there is no typical week to start out, but contrary to popular opinion, or maybe not, we don't just work on Tuesdays. County committee meetings are on Mondays. I'm on Legislative Committee and the Transportation, Water, and Infrastructure Committee and the Finance Committee, so we meet once a month. Then I'm on regional committees, and those take longer because usually I have to travel to San Francisco. Then, of course, Delta work is up in Sacramento. So some week, 1 week of the month, I typically have a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night meeting. And I'm exhausted by Friday. And I'm lucky I have control of my calendar, so my staff doesn't schedule me very busily on Friday, if not at all. Weekends, there are evening events, but a lot of them are social. They're not. You go because you've met people, like I'm going to a crab feed tomorrow night. I'll have fun. I can have an alcoholic beverage if I choose.
Or 3.
But you're still sort of on. You know, people have an expectation of how elected officials. I'm really interested in watching this whole thing in Virginia right now. And we have an expectation of how our elected officials should behave. And I share that expectation. Having worked for Sonny, a fabulous mentor, I have an expectation of elected officials. So by the end of a week where I've had 3 meetings at night in a row and daytime, and I'm able to block out maybe an afternoon before I'm going to have an evening meeting in San Francisco that I don't get out of till 10. So some weeks are 60 hours. Some weeks I can move down to about 35 to balance it out. And I still have time to find time for reading, because one of the things about me is, as much as I'm around people and I'm social that way, I need to be around people, but I don't need to always interact with them. So I may go out for breakfast because I like being in a restaurant, but I'll sit there and read. So that answers, I guess, the best I can.
So speaking of crab feeds, I know Debbie Toth has
That's the one I'm going to.
her Choice in Aging crab feed tomorrow night.
And it's a disco
Or I should say
theme.
Saturday. Is it Saturday night or Friday night?
Oh, you're right, Saturday.
Saturday
Tuesday.
night.
Saturday night.
But you were able to pull off a little trickery and surprisery a few weeks ago and surprised her with the board chair award. How were you able to pull that off, and why did you pick her?
I picked Debbie because she is probably, we have a lot of wonderful advocates in this county for each issue that's important. But maybe because of the situation I dealt with prior to my father's death, and now with my mother as an 88-year-old woman, I'm recognizing the tremendous demands not only on the aging population, but on their children. And so Debbie has helped me navigate some of that. So I've grown to see more of what she does than just what I knew beforehand. And we've got an aging population, and I know John is focused again on family and children. I think we need to also focus on our elders. It's going to be a big issue, and Debbie has a compassionate program. I've been up there. I would encourage you to go see it if you want. How I was able to pull it off, she's so busy. I just said to her, my last board meeting as chair will be on December 18th. If you have the opportunity, why don't you come on down? And that was all she needed, I guess. And then I was able to have my staff call people and say, this is what we're doing, please keep it quiet. I actually was surprised that she didn't know about it, because she's so in tune with different things. So that's the reason I selected her for the chair of the board award, and how we were able to pull it off. And actually, this coming Tuesday, we're doing a resolution honoring Choice in Aging for 70 years of service to the community.
Yeah, it's an awesome organization, and I'm going to bring Debbie in at some point again.
Yeah, I think education needs to be out there. You're not there yet with your family. You've got a growing family, and your parents and or other elders, in their 50s and 60s, we're still really vibrant. And some live forever and healthily. But Debbie's big issue is this transportation. That's where our paths intersect.
It's huge. It's a huge problem, especially out in East County. Mm-hmm. And if anyone could figure out, it's her. She's just got that passion to drive it.
Well, that's it. She's the one that brought to us as a county, and then we took it to the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. We need to be better at transporting seniors from point A to point B across the county and not having to change a bus every hour or two.
Absolutely. So, and again, I know we're running out of time here, but in closing, what would you say over your long history in politics and that you've been most proud of, and what are some of your future endeavors as board, on the Board of Supervisors?
What have I been most proud of? I don't know how effective I've been at it. I want people to understand government, and I try in every presentation I give to community groups or going to high school is you need to be involved, you need to be registered, and that government isn't this thing that is bad. Yes, it provides service. That's my whole theme has always been how county government touches you, and you may not even know it if you don't partake of services, but you're getting services. Example, you go to the grocery store, those weights and scales are taken care of by county agriculture department. You go into a restaurant, health services has been there. So I'm really happy to have been part of that. I don't know if it's something I can take a lot of pride in. One of the reasons I announce every year how many books I've read is I'm a big supporter of libraries. Libraries were there when I grew up as a kid. Then we had the standalone brick and mortars, and those have sort of come and gone with Amazon and what have you. But wealthier people could afford to go and buy books. They didn't understand why you still needed libraries, and especially for computer services. So I'm hoping that continues. Obviously in Pleasant Hill we're building a new library. I hope to see a library somewhere on the Concord Naval Weapons Station.
Well, and you guys got rid of the late fees too.
Yes, and we actually got criticized by some people for that because they felt if you didn't have the late fees, what was the incentive for people to turn things in?
Well,
there still are things
There's
that
$20 fine.
Yeah, you will be charged for a book that is not returned within X amount of days.
And actually, did you see the tweet the other day from the county library system where they got the oldest book returned to date so far was December of 1990.
Wow. No, I did not. But that's great.
Fun fact.
I mean, I can remember as a kid sometimes because, you only had one car in the family, and I lived on the other side of Pleasant Hill and not getting a book back until you got your quarters together, So I was a big fan of that, and especially since the data showed that it didn't impact or impair people returning books, and in fact it encouraged people more to use books and libraries, and that's very important.
Yeah. And I think you were in that kind of lull, not you, but the library system was in that lull of, well, there is Amazon, there is these online books, there are audio, but I think they finally figured out where they need to go in the future, and you're going to start seeing that transition. And
Libraries
I think libraries will be
different.
hip again.
They are, because like I'm fortunate my community, Walnut Creek built a library. It opened, I think, right as I was coming into office. But there are separate rooms for teens to go in and do homework. There's separate rooms for computers, for community groups to come in and do things. It's a homier thing. The library I grew up in was the Pleasant Hill Library, and you walked in and there were all these tables, and the books were on the periphery because kids went there to do their homework. You don't do that very much anymore.
You bring your laptop.
Right, or it's a place for seniors to go on limited incomes because they're used to reading newspapers and they want hard copies. And as my colleague, I don't do it like she does. She downloads a lot of books because her district and Diane's are the largest, and she drives a lot. And so instead of buying, she just downloads them, and that's how she listens to books on tape and utilizes that. And actually, you can get that faster, I think, than if you're waiting for a hardbound book. So it serves a lot of purposes.
Yeah.
What else? Okay, voter and people engaged in government, libraries. I just want to continue to have people that were reachable, that my door is open to anybody to come in and talk to me. In fact, every letter I close when I have to send a letter to somebody where I disagree with them or have to tell them no in one way or another is, if you'd like to continue talking about this, my schedule will be happy to schedule a telephone appointment, or you're welcome to come in and meet with me. And sometimes people do. Other times they don't. But it's important for them to know that it isn't like, thank you for your concern, sincerely, And the person gets the letter and it's like, oh great, I got a letter, but nothing was resolved. I want them to feel that even if it couldn't be resolved to their satisfaction, that I heard them.
Sure.
And my colleagues do that too.
You have empathy for people that have a concern.
Right. That's what local government is about. And what we're here for. And that is the one pet peeve I have, is don't lump us in. People will say, well, we'll see what's going on in Washington. Well, obviously I know people in Washington. I have a great deal of concern for them, but that's why I like a Board of Supervisors. I only have to deal with 4 other people. I've never wanted to go work in Sacramento as an elected official because I don't want anybody telling me what to do. And that's unfortunately what happens. It's the way it works up there, and I don't like it.
Sure. Well, on that note, we are getting long, so I'm going to I know there's 100 other topics I'd love to talk about, such as,
Well, I can come out every 6 months, Mike, or whatever. Maybe when we have a breakthrough or something more on water, I'll let you know.
Perfect. So, Karen, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to drive all the way out to Antioch.
It's
where
not that far, you know.
Well, Randy did a great job on Highway 4, so it's cut the commute in half.
Well, I have dear friends who live out here. I take this way to go across the bridge to go see my mom. So
Perfect.
To me, it's just 10, 15 minutes down the road. And, you don't have traffic at certain times, and you just get to drive. It's sort of fun.
Yeah. So I want to thank you so much for coming out, and
You're welcome.
for everybody, please, if you like this podcast, please subscribe. Much appreciated. Please like, subscribe, follow, and we'll check you out next time. Take care.